So welcome at the Conversations, a series of talks on the future of authorship and of publishing. In this edition today, we will focus on two subjects. First, the position of aspiring writers in an international context, and second, writers in the social domain. As for the schedule of this afternoon, our first topic will be introduced by 3 lectures on video, each with a length of approximately 7 minutes. After that, we will be talking with this panel and you, of course, in the audience until 3:10. Then we will have a 10-minute break before we start the second topic. This will be at 15:20, and the second topic is on writing in the social domain. Also introduced by 3 short video messages. We will discuss the second topic until 16:20 and then round up. And we will end this afternoon at 16:30 at the last to have a beer at the bar. If you have in the audience any questions, comments, or contributions during these conversations, use the raise hand button. And Elke, who is producing this event, you cannot see her, but she is there, will give you the opportunity to speak or to be visible. That's all for the household rules for now. My name is Frank Tazelaar. I'm the founder of CELA and head of the writing department at Radboud University of the Arts, and also artistic director of the host of today, Wintertuin. And I will be talking today to this lovely panel. I will introduce them briefly to you. We have Michala Chikakova. If you could wave your hand, or you could see her name, of course. Hi, Michala. She is artistic coordinator of CELA, coordinator of the international collaborations at the Czech Literary Center in Prague. Welcome, Michala. Second, we have Merlijn Huntjens. He's a writer, a supervisor of the writing workshop at House of the Arts in Limburg, and a founding member of Borderlines, the literary platform in the Meuse-Rhine region. Welcome, Merlijn. Great to have you. Third, we have Dennis Kersten. Dennis is assistant professor and researcher modern languages and cultures at the Radboud University in Nijmegen. Welcome, Dennis. And we have Corinne Rigaud. She's sector head at the European Commission on the European Networks, European Platforms and Literary Translation at the EU in Brussels. Welcome, Corinne, to this panel. And last we have, but not least, of course, Lily van Engen. She is a consultant at Cultuur Oost. Cultuur Oost is a consultancy institution that works with art and culture to help makers and decision makers come up with solutions for social issues. So welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to have you. And if it's okay with you, I would like to start right away with part 1 of this afternoon. And to start off with our first topic today on the position of aspiring writers in an international context, we could state that modern day authors operate increasingly more at an international level. The question that we have is, what does this mean for the position of the author, the valuation of their work, and the sustainability of their professional practice? Today, we will try to shed some light on these complicated questions with the help of a pilot study into the position of aspiring writers in the CELA project. This research project is called What Starting Writers Do and Why, and is executed by Radboud University's Institute for Culture and History. By the way, for those of you who do not know, CELA stands for Connecting Emerging Literary Artists, which is an EU-funded international talent development program for writers, translators, and young literary professionals now working in 10 European countries over the course of 4 years. So to introduce the topic of the research on starting writers, what they do and why, we will first watch a series of 3 short video lectures. The first one is by Professor Dr. Maarten de Poerk, who I know is present in the audience and available for questions afterwards. So, Elke, let's start the first video lecture.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Maarten de Poerk. I am Professor of European Literature at Radboud University in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And together with my colleagues Helke van der Braber and Eva Hekman, I have the pleasure of introducing you to our research project, What Starting Writers Do and Why. It is a project that looks at the way in which literary creators at the start of their career conceive of their task as a creator in an international context. The start of this project dates back to the summer of 2018 when Frank Tazelaar, whom you already know, invited us to examine the impact of CELA, a program for the development of literary talent in Europe, which started out in 2017. The literary talent involved here are writers, translators, and literary professionals more in general, for instance, curators of literary festivals. The lovely people you see here were part of the first generation of CELA. As you can see, it is a diverse group consisting of people from different European countries, all countries that are, so to speak, less central in the European literary field. So rather than Germany, France or England, CELA welcomes people from, for instance, Belgium, Poland, Portugal or the Netherlands, just to name a few. The aim of CELA is to connect these creative people with each other, with the literary industry, and with a wider European readership. By doing so, CELA aims to innovate the field, to innovate the industry, and to have an impact on the different so-called literary ecologies at stake here. That is to say, the different environments in which these writers live and have to live with. So we took up this challenge and developed a project called What Starting Writers Do and Why. The title already indicates that we wish to start from the perspective of the creators themselves rather than the institutions or the industry. Our interest lies in the way in which these creators experience or have experienced their entry into the literary field and to what extent CELA has had an influence on this. We believe this to be important questions not only to gain insight into the value orientations of starting writers, which is of course at the very heart of this project, but also because these questions have a literary historical value. For the conditions under which starting European writers enter the literary field have fundamentally changed over the last decades. Publishers, for instance, generally prefer famous names. They no longer invest in translations from lesser-known European regions and put their resources into mainstream novels rather than more innovative works. So rather in books than, say, cross-media projects. As a result of this, the diversity of the literature on offer has suffered. Education programs in creative writing do look for new ways to support young writers, yet they often have difficulty in letting go of traditional curricula and continue to rely on novels or poetry published in book forms or in book form. Meanwhile, the expectations of readers are rapidly developing. Today, readers seem just as interested in actively experiencing literature as in more passive readership. And of course, there are significant differences between countries in the European Union in terms of support for writers, for translators, for publishers, for talent development, and so on. In addition to all of this, it should also be noted that literary writers are no longer the main storytellers in our world. We live in a society in which storytelling is even increasingly contested in politics, in media, in economics. This too imposes different demands on starting writers. But, and here's the good news, we do see that many starting writers love to explore the implications of, for instance, post-truth storytelling, of literature in a digital world, of literature in a commercial and global world for a wide variety of audiences. They love to respond to the need for new art forms, if they get the chance to do it. And in some cases they just go for it even though they have to work within a mostly conservative national literary industry with fixed business models. On the other side of the spectrum, there are also the writers who focus on writing good books and who wish to add or to contribute in a meaningful manner to existing traditions of, for instance, poetry or drama. How can SILA, or any other institution for that matter, for instance creative writing programs, help these starting writers to find their position, to define what they find important to do, and to connect them with the literary industry or connect the literary industry with them? The bottom line of our project is that by uncovering what starting writers do and why, we expand the role these innovative yet vulnerable creative professionals play in reviving and strengthening the literary ecosystem. Understanding their expectations and understanding the roles they are willing to play and able to play helps them to chart their course. And it helps the literary institutions, as well as the creative industries, to be more responsive to their creative practices. Part of our research project, as you see it outlined here, would consist of conducting interviews with starting writers, mainly from SILA. In the next video, Helleke van den Braber will tell you more about the methodology we have chosen for this. After Helleke, Eva Hekman will talk about a few test cases she has performed thanks to seed money we received from the Radboud Institute for Culture and History. What we would like to talk about in the conversation afterwards is to which players in the field this kind of insight into value orientations of starting writers would be of interest, and whether this is indeed the form it should take. It would also be helpful to learn whether the methodology used seems appropriate and realistic, and whether the group of SILA people we would like to focus on for the interviews should be counterbalanced by other groups of writers. So please keep these questions in mind when listening to Helleke and Eva. I will give the floor to them, and thank you for being here, and we are looking forward to seeing you after this video.
So thank you, Martin. We know you're in the audience. We will get to you later. I think some of the sound was not all that good, so maybe later we could discuss the questions that you had, Martin, when we finish the videos. Let's see if we can go to the next video, and hopefully we'll have a little better sound, something with the internet, I think. In the next video, we will dive in a little deeper and hear more about how to investigate the values of young writers and translators for that matter. And the question there is, why do they do the things they do? And Helleke van den Braber, from her point of view as a researcher, will explain.
Hello, I'm Helleke van den Braber, one of the researchers involved in this project. And as Maarten de Poork explained just now, our focus is on the value orientation of young makers, writers and translators. Why do they do the things they do? And what are the values that, in their view, guide their actions? And to investigate this, we have established a framework based on the so-called world theory of two sociologists, Boltanski and Thévenot. This world theory is very helpful if you want to focus on practices or on conventions, in this case, literary practices and conventions. Point of departure is that in the literary world, writers and translators encounter and have to relate to different worlds, with each world associated with its own value regime. The idea is that these worlds and value regimes are all constantly present and available to literary makers. And as they move around, take their actions and make their choices, authors and translators cannot help but relate to them and use them to orient themselves and their actions. And over the next few minutes, I will present to you a list of 7 value regimes. You can view each of them as a set of norms and criteria that writers may use to determine the most appropriate or legitimate action and to legitimize those actions as well. In our research, we use the value regimes as the basis of our interviews with makers. This way, we can find out what values are important to them and to what extent they act on them. For example, Do young writers and translators find it important that their work has a lot of social impact? Do they actively seek recognition for their work, or do they mainly want their work to sell well? And crucially, do these wishes also correspond to what they actually do? I will take you all now briefly through this list of value regimes, and you will probably recognize them instantly from your own practice as literary maker or professional. Main question is, how, based on what values, do literary makers make their choices, and how do they legitimize those choices? I'm going to share my screen. Here we are. The 7 value regimes. The first is what is called the regime of inspiration. And in this regime, the main issue is how writers and translators use what they see as the artistic value of their work to legitimize their choices. And there are 2 core values associated with this regime. And the first is the regime of the value of inspiration. And this translates into the wish as a writer to get, to give, or to seek inspiration through your work, to the work that you do as a writer or translator. Another important value in this regime is the value of autonomy, the wish to work on your own terms, regardless of the wishes and expectations of others. The second regime is what is called the domestic regime. And what is at stake there is how writers and translators use what they see as the heritage value, or conversely, the innovative value of their work, and how they use this to legitimize their choices. 2 core values, again here. Tradition is one, the wish as a writer or translator to build upon or contribute or develop what you see as the national or international literary tradition. And another core value is education, the wish to receive knowledge from your peers or to pass it on, knowledge of literature or the literary past. The third regime is the regime of fame. And in this regime, the issue at stake is how writers and translators use what they see as the international recognition of and media attention for their work to legitimize their choices. People oriented in this regime have 2 core values, say Boltanski and Thévenot. They act from a wish to be recognized as maker. For example, by receiving prizes, getting signed by a publisher, or added to the lineup of festivals. Seeking recognition is one of the core values in this regime. The core value of image is important as well, the wish to present yourself and your work to the world, and importantly also to the people or institutions that you want to be associated with. Also, the importance you attach or not attach to opinions in general. In the civic regime, something else is at stake. How writers and translators use what they see as the societal relevance or the societal mission of their work to legitimize their choices. Core values here are the value of societal impact, the wish to address social problems or issues, for instance, by giving voice to new perspectives or to underrepresented groups or individuals. Also, the value of connection, the wish to use your work to seek or create connection between people or institutions, for instance, between yourself as a writer or translator and your readers. The fifth regime is that of the industrial regime. And here the issue is how writers and translators use what they see as their professional and artistic expertise or experience to legitimize their choices. And here, a core value is the value of entrepreneurship, the wish to have or develop a sort of business-like and professional mentality and to be oriented to entrepreneurial goals as well. Orientation on the future is important here as well. The wish to develop artistically or professionally towards the future, for instance, by setting recognizable goals or developing a strategy. The market regime then. Here it is important how writers and translators use their perception of their sales figures to legitimize their choices. Core values are here the wish to steer or control or have insight in the popularity of your work, and measure this by looking at the circulation of your books, looking at the amount of copies printed, or by the price that people are willing to pay for it. And also a core value here is the value of competition, the wish to be more popular or more successful than your peers. It's important to add that either as a writer or translator, you recognize those core values, of course, or you do not. Both standpoints are relevant and important to us. So either you say, yes, this is a value I recognize and I adhere to, or you say, I do not at all recognize myself in these values. That's what values do, of course. You either recognize them or you don't. And this goes for all the values presented here in this presentation. Also, the project, and the last is this one, a project city regime. Here is the issue how writers and translators use what they see as the scope or reach of their network, their national or international network, and how they use this to legitimize their choices. Core values at stake here are the wish to build and maintain connections to important or powerful figures or institutions and to build up a certain network. Another core value here is the value of collaboration, the wish to collaborate with others, and importantly, the wish to collaborate with well-positioned others that can strengthen your own position and further your career. These regimes and the core values associated with them and the measure to which writers and translators recognize these values or do not recognize those values are important stepping stones for us to map the different roles and skills of young writers and translators. And how we did this mapping, and what methods we use to map them, this will be explained to you by our junior researcher Eva Heckman in the next video. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Helleke. I know you're in the audience. We will get back to you later, I think, with some questions on these values. So we have this big project Sela. Helleke explained the way this is being investigated, and now we go to the next video, the last video lecture in this series before we start talking, in which Eva Heckman will explain how she actually performed the research on Sela writers from these value regimes. I would suggest we start the last video in this series. Eva Heckman.
Hi everyone, my name is Eva Heckman and I conducted the pilot study for the project What Starting Writers Do and Why. I will have to open my presentation first. Yes. So during this pilot I tested the research instrument based on the 7 value regimes, and I tried to explore the ways in which starting writers and translators reflect upon the values they believe to be present in their work as a writer. I did this by conducting interviews with 2 writers and 2 translators connected to the Sela project. And during these interviews I asked them to rank a list of 14 core values such as connection, inspiration and entrepreneurship. And they had to rank them based on how guiding they perceive these values to be in their day-to-day work as a literary creator. And then I went into some further detail through elaborating questions. These interviews provided, and this pilot also provided valuable information, but also left us with some questions and concerns that we would like to discuss with you today. The main thing that we want to know is if this method aligns with the way in which writers experience their literary practice. Is this method suitable for truly and effectively mapping and interpreting what young writers and translators do, and why? But first, let me explain what exactly I did. The pilot consisted of 3 steps. First, I operationalized the research instruments. So how can we make these value regimes work for this particular research? And I did this by concisely summarizing the regimes and situating them in the literary practice. For each regime, I drew up a hypothetical maker profile consisting of several characteristics aligning with the regime at hand. So, for example, a writer in the regime of fame would want to be in the spotlight, is consciously working on their own image, and attaches great importance to public opinion. Second, I drew up what we call a corresponding topic list, a list of 14 values, so 2 values per regime. For example, for the civic regime, I chose to translate this regime into the values social impact and connection. I also added a fixed definition to each value. For the interviews, I chose to focus on the creator's own interpretation of the core values, as we want to know about their own perception and experience. The fixed definitions were set up in case the participants would have no idea what we meant by a certain value. This way, all participants would receive the exact same information, but only once asked. And 3, last but not least, I conducted 4 test interviews with 2 writers and 2 translators. I chose to use the same method for both writers and translators because even though there are some notable differences between their practices, they are all literary creators trying to gain access to the European literary sector. Also, using the same method would mean a more equal comparison between the 2 types of creators. And as previously mentioned, the interviews consisted of a ranking part focused on their value orientation and a part with open questions focusing on their perception of their position and entrance in the literary sector. So for the ranking part, I used this program called Mural, as you can see here. I presented the 14 values on sticky notes that the participants then had to arrange in the figure next to it. The top of the figure representing the most important values and the bottom the least important. When they were done with their arrangements, I asked them to explain their choices. So, for example, why is this value the most important to you and how does that show in your day-to-day work? For the second part, I asked them some more elaborating questions based on these 5 categories. So their current position and future goals, helping factors, limiting factors, their perception of their position in the current literary sector, and last but not least, the role of Sela. Now on to some brief results, very brief, but they are here. Yes, the rank part showed that the values inspiration and connection were the most important to writers as well as translators. Both of these values were often mentioned as the reason that they do what they do. And both translators, they translated inspiration to telling stories, which they perceive to be the core of their practice. Finding inspiration in stories from other languages and in turn inspiring people in their own language area, thereby connecting different cultures and people. One of the writers said that inspiration is the most fun part of being a creator. So being able to daydream and not having to go back to your real work for daydreaming is your work. Autonomy was greatly valued by the writers. They seem to attribute a lot of agency to themselves and consider it important to be able to do what they want and when they want. Interestingly enough, they did not really link autonomy to artistic autonomy or financial autonomy, but mostly to organizational autonomy. So being able to make their own schedule. As could be expected, the values competition, entrepreneurship, and sales figures were overall lowly ranked. This could be because these values are commonly associated with commerciality and personal gain, being better than others, seizing opportunities to make money, and wanting to sell goods, instead of artisticity and striving for a greater artistic or social purpose. So to gain a position in the European literary sector, you have to compete against others. Another striking result is that the value network never ranked highly, even though the importance of their network surfaced many times in the rest of the interview. Once again, they could have concealed the importance of this value because networking for the sake of networking isn't commonly appreciated. The writers perfectly illustrated the sense by describing network as a dirty word. Then on to the open questions. They firstly revealed that both writers and translators perceive themselves as starting creators. They are consciously working on their artistic as well as their professional development. It is noteworthy that writers in all of these activities actively look outside the fixed genres of their profession. Apart from working on their novel, they work on or aspire to work on film scripts, podcasts, music, and virtual reality. They want to be all-round creators and actively seek collaborations with creators from other disciplines. This confirms the starting point of a research project. Young writers take on new roles and experiment with new types of media. Secondly, the open questions revealed the helping and limiting factors these creators experience in their entrance in the European literary field. Among the translators, one helping factor stood out in particular. Both mention a mentor who helped them into the profession and with whom they still work closely. These mentors provide them network, assignments, guidance, and feedback. The translators also mentioned the Dutch Foundation for Literature, CELA, the Center for Literary Translation, the School of Translators, and the magazine Pluk as helping institutions. I wrote them down in Dutch just to have their original name there. The writers mentioned CELA and the Literary Fund as well, and Wintertuin and De Buren. In addition, residencies and talent programs are very important to them. The greatest limiting factor for both writers and translators is, you guessed it, money. Translators in particular say they are poorly paid and have to fight hard for financial recognition or recognition at all. And being underpaid is mentioned as a sector-wide problem. On top of that, they say it's difficult to get grants because of the bureaucracy. Here we can find an interesting paradox. While entrepreneurship and sales figures were lowly ranked and written off as unimportant or uninteresting, they all admit that income and payment is of great importance to them. Tensions and contradictions like these occurred in other subject areas as well. On the subject of competition, as I already mentioned, but also regarding autonomy and collaborations. Another important result revolves around the distinction between writers and translators. Although the question method and topic list in itself seem to fit well with the practice of both writers and translators, their answers differed substantially in a number of areas. On top of that, the writers' answers were much more profound and diverse, while the translators' answers seemed rather repetitive. One explanation for this could be that being a translator is not their daily occupation. They do this alongside other jobs because otherwise they would not be able to make ends meet. In addition, the creative process and thus the artistic freedom of a writer is different from that of a translator. The artistic freedom of a translator lies in the selection of the works they translate and in the interpretation and translation of these works. This makes their relationship to authorship fundamentally different. Now on to your inputs. We would like to open a discussion about the following topics. First, do these regimes, according to you, indeed cover all the values that startup creators encounter in their practice? And second, is it fruitful to question writers as well as translators? And if so, would it be better to use different question methods? Or can we just use the same method? Third question, we want to work towards a competency profile describing the new roles and tasks that a 21st century starting writer in this European literary sector could perform, and the know-how and the attitudes that are associated with those roles. Would this method provide the right insights? And would these insights also be useful for innovation of the creative writing programs? And last, as I already mentioned, some subjects seem to evoke particular tensions that result in concealed answers. We think it would be interesting to dive deeper into these tensions. What exactly are the subjects or themes that evoke the need to conceal, and why? One of our ideas to better highlight such tensions is to work with scenarios. For example, how would you handle situation A or situation B? Do you think this would be a good addition to our question method? And if so, can you come up maybe with some scenarios that would be interesting to question? So yeah, that was my presentation, and thank you very much. I hope you have a fruitful discussion.
So thank you, Eva and Martin and Helke, of course, for this contribution to this conversations. This is a very interesting and very broad introduction on our subjects, I think. And we have a lot of questions to be asked. Again, if you in the panel, especially Eva, Martin and Helke, want to interrupt or ask questions, do so, raise your hand. I would like to start off with a question maybe to all of us from our different positions. What use do you think we as institutions, organizations, universities have to have a better insight in these value orientations of writers? Does it help us to adjust our policies and procedures? Maybe to you, Corinne, is this kind of looking at value orientation of writers in a changing literary environment, is it helpful to understand what we are doing?
Yes, obviously, and I would like to congratulate you for this research and for this pilot, because this is there is a need. There is a need, and this research and this pilot is very interesting in many aspects. And but one interest for us, and when I say for us, it's for the Creative Europe program, is that I don't know if you know, but the program, Creative Europe program, is supports the cooperation, let's say, and the projects are not directly individuals. But we are looking more and more into that, how to support directly with the program the individuals, I mean the artists and cultural professionals. Mm-hmm. So that's something very crucial, especially nowadays, to help the individuals, the artists and cultural professionals to make a living and to work in better conditions.
Yes, yeah.
And in the best possible conditions, actually. And as I said, it's especially important and crucial today in the situation we are living. And we started looking into that with some pilot projects. For example, the pilot for the mobility, individual mobility for artists and cultural professionals, called Hypotenuse. This is a kind of, I don't like to say that, but this is a kind of Erasmus for artists. And we support directly artists and emerging artists what you call starting writers, for example. Next year will be the European year for youth. So we will be focusing with the program and with Creative Europe and with all the actions and the instruments, we will be focusing on youth, and especially when it comes to artists, on emerging talent. So there will be special initiatives, special actions, pilots on this very, very important, to my eyes, very important themes and topic. So your work and your research, this pilot, is very important and useful for us because it helps us as managers of a EU program, funding program, to see where are the needs to support the individuals. How can we support the individuals better? And how can we help to set up a framework for very good, or at least good, conditions for the artists, but also for the skills. So this is something we reflect more and more on. So what are the needs? Because as you know, or I inform you that the budget we have for the program, it's not a big budget. We have really little money to support all the projects we would like to support. So we have to be very, very precise on what we want to support and where are the most burning or most crucial needs. So this is important that you conduct the studies we need to define the needs so that we can help.
Yeah.
So I will stop here because
no, this is very
I can
clear.
say a lot of things about that, but yes, it's very useful, and thank you for conducting such a study, and congrats.
Thank you very much, Corinne. I think to be precise where the needs are, and talking about a changing literary environment and a globalizing and more digitizing world, we see something in the investigative research Eva did was the low ranking of network and entrepreneurship. Michala, you work with writers, you sell rights for Czech writers in numerous languages, of course, all over the world. Do you recognize this low ranking of this entrepreneurship, and do you see the changes in the values that writers that you work with, that the values are changing as we see in the research? Michala.
So I'm from the Czech Literary Center, so we do not sell rights directly. We're just trying to connect publishers from abroad with the Czech authors, and we are trying to have this wide nest of translators from Czech in different languages. So I'm not dealing with selling rights, but I'm trying to push the authors to travel more, to go, to promote themselves, to promote the book when we finally succeeded and found a publishing house abroad who wants to publish a Czech author. And for the Czech Republic, it's a hard job. It's already 32 years after the change of regime. So we are 32 years democratic and open to the European world and to the global world. But still, there is a lot of hesitation to feel to be part of this global network and to stand as an European or as a world author. So we don't know why it is. Maybe it takes more time. But if I look to the most famous authors who gained success internationally, those who were aware of this networking potential, who were aware that they are entrepreneurs, and they had this courage to quit their normal jobs and to start to travel around Europe, to promote themselves, to talk with literary institutions, to search for money on their own without no support from the state. And this is, I'm afraid, how it works. So you need to have this courage and to see the potential. And there are always money around the world. And always there are people who are willing to help you, I think. But you need to stand up and go out from your perspective. You need to change the perspectives a little bit. So that's why we were so keen on joining the SILA project, because it's something totally new for us. The new perspective that there should be also training on creative writing. We have just one high school focusing on creative writing. So this is totally new for us. The writers do not see a career path. There is not such construct like this. They normally have their normal jobs. They can't go on residencies because they have to take 4 weeks off from the work, and they don't have any time for the family vacation. So we are struggling with all these issues. Not everybody is willing to travel abroad, even if the books are published in foreign languages. There is the language barriers and mental barriers before all. So this is why the project and the study we heard and the outcomes of it so important for us. We are seeing where are the gaps, what courses, what programs could we offer as a as a state-run institution, and to provide them some more education and training and raising awareness, pushing them to raise their self-esteem and to see the perspectives, to travel more, to feel secure that they are in a group of other people. For the first steps, they can't go alone. It's too challenging for them. So that's why the networks are important for us, to be surrounded by emerging authors as well, trying to search for support. And the same is also for the translators. So
yeah. No, this is very interesting. So we see, as well as Corinne said, at the EU, but also at the level of a national literary fund, as what you represent, a responsibility to contribute to this awareness and to the development of thinking about the values and about the changes in the literary field. We have here also in real life a young writer. We are not only talking about them, but we're also talking with them. Marlijn, welcome. Looking at these values as Helleke presented and the research that Eva did, how do you look at this? Is it something that a writer as you're a young writer, but also a teacher and an entrepreneur? Do you look, or do you even want to reflect on your work in this manner from these values point of views?
So first of all, it's nice to meet you all. And I did a little ranking myself during the presentation. I didn't complete it all the way, but I would say I rank highest on connection and autonomy, of course. But the strange thing was, I thought that it was a contradiction to the how do you say, entrepreneurship. So there seems to be a contradiction between being artistic and autonomous and being business-like and networking, and that was a real surprise for me, because I also would say I rank high on entrepreneurship. The lowest I would rank on the competition, because that's a paradox. For me, that's a paradox with collaborating with other artists. But I would say you'll need the entrepreneurship to organize your artistic freedom. So to say they're in a competition with each other would be a strange concept to me, and I would be eager to motivate everyone to invest more in entrepreneurship. I live in a region where we don't have a real tight literary field or a real tight structure. So if you want to make a living as a writer in the southest part of the Netherlands, you have to do, well, it's an advantage and it's a disadvantage at the same time. You have to do everything yourself. So you have a lot of freedom, but you also have a lot of responsibility. So they help each other in some way. So yeah, it's of course, because their values, they're highly recognizable for me. And I couldn't really answer the question, what value are we missing at this point? It all seems very complete to me. And yeah, so I was really way immediately to reflect on that and to have some notes on it. So really interesting.
This is interesting also from the CELA perspective. I think we are moving, or CELA is represented in countries, as Martin also said in his video, not France or England or English or German, but the smaller languages, which is maybe a comparison to the region you are talking about. Going to you, Lily, you are working in a region in the eastern part of the Netherlands, which is also on the outskirts of our country, of course. We are in the same situation, I think, as Marlijn. Do you recognize this need to network and to collaborate amongst artists in your work?
Yes, I really see that. As a provincial organization to help makers to see how their arts can contribute to society. We see that also not only the autonomy of arts as writing in this case, but also as a form of income to get to really connect to the social domain. And social domain is a political correct determination, but it also means that you help people who don't have access to arts or to study to help to get a voice, to express themselves. And I think in that way we connect artists from all disciplines, and we create a network where they can inspire them, each other, to see what can we contribute to the society, to people who usually don't have an access to arts, and how can we get an income of it. And then I talk about arts education in primary and secondary schools with your arts, with writing, for example, but also in the social domain, libraries, public health, welfare institutions, and all that. So that is my goal, that I create a network where people can get inspiration how to get an income with their arts. So networking is very important. Yeah.
So if I hear all this, and I'm not sure about you, but there is a change also in how we perceive the writer. We are talking about networking. We are talking about income. We are talking about responsibility, as Marlijn said. Do you think, Dennis, that the position of the writer in the cultural discourse and the societal discourse changed over the past decades, and that programs like CELA and also other programs, also the borderlines that Marlijn is in, and the things that are being funded by the EU, are really necessary, not to produce more artistic work, more novels, but to secure and enhance and maybe broaden the position of writers in our society?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think it's a great project. I'm a direct colleague of Maarten, Helleke, and Eva, so perhaps I would say that, but it is a great project. I think the regime theory and the model is very helpful to have, if only as a vocabulary for discussions like this today. So it's great to hear from Marlijn how he places himself or how he ranks himself, according to the various regimes. The idea I get is that for some time now, certainly in the West, there's been a tension between, on the one hand, authors operating especially under the inspiration regime, and on the second, an economic system which is more market-oriented, but says it's very much focused on the civic regime. Or at least an economic system that expects authors to operate more within the civic regime. And it seems that authors now move more from the inspiration regime to the civic regime, or the project city one. I forget the exact name of the other one. Whereas the economic system has not changed. So it may say that it expects artists and authors to, do their work in to the service of the society, etc. And perhaps they're moving from their ivory tower, if that was the previous position in the first place. But the economic system is still market oriented, and I still see that tension, even though authorship is changing. I think for the teaching of literature, because that also is where your question comes in, Frank. It's very important to study evolving conceptions of authorship and practices of authorship, especially if storytelling indeed is no longer, if it ever was, the sole domain of authors. In fact, the bakery in my neighborhood, it has a poster outside its entrance and it says, "We sell products and stories." And I still want to go there and ask what the stories are. And the supermarket we have on our university campus, in their window, apparently their motto is, "This is where products and stories meet," which is also very interesting. I think at university we're still very much focused on literature when we study storytelling, certainly in the language bachelors and masters. And that's because of the history of our educational system, I guess, and the way in which we've taught literature so far in the past, although this is changing too. And yes, as a university, we're also working together with Frank, with Wintertuin and Cela, and the creative writing course of Artes, the art school. And one of the reasons for that is exactly to make sure that the things we discussed today here as well also become part of the discussions we have about literature and authorship at university.
Which is changing, of course, also due to digital developments and so forth, but also due to the creative writing programs, I think, that arise everywhere. I wonder, when we look at the EU, Corinne, we have the same position, I think, looking from policymakers towards literature as Dennis described the university had, mainly focused on book publishing and so forth. Does the EU have instruments to actually reach out to these new developments? Are you in connection with the field from your perspective?
I'm not sure that I did catch your question. So can you repeat, please?
So most policies and most funding from the EU is still based at translation and publication of books, as where writers are moving away more and more, as Dennis described, towards different kinds of artistic practices. Do you feel that you are in contact with these developments from your point of view?
Yes, we are. We are quite aware of the evolution of the careers of the writers and the artists, and we try to be connected to the ground. And via the projects, actually, we try to be connected and as much informed as possible. So, and I think that we have already, I think, tried to adapt the new calls for proposals and the new program regarding the book sector, for example. So we would like more and more to support professional development for the professionals in the book sector, and more and more work on skills and capacity building, for example. And this has been translated into the fact that, for example, literary translation, which is the classical action we have for the book sector within Creative Europe program, now it's something larger. And the objectives are more ambitious. We support now not only translation, but promotion, distribution, and publication, of course. Translators and writers are more and more addressed. And we have drafted with the pilot for mobility for the artist. There was a specific call for writers and translators, and these specific calls and these specific actions and instruments, I think, give a positive and good signal in the sense that we try to adapt and to take into account what is going on in the sector, and again, where and what are the needs, and where we can intervene, and where we can have the best and the best support.
Yeah, I think that's just the question: how to make interventions in the system that is operational always, of course, and it's maybe also for you, Michaela, as Corinne said, is it difficult for you to get a grasp of this new literary profession, which also consists of collaborations, for instance, between writers and translators, as Corinne said, or different collaborations?
Of course, and I think it's legitimate if an author doesn't want to be involved in any networking at all, and he insists that his value is just the autonomy and inspiration values. I fully understand it. It's his or her decision, and this decision we cannot change it or force anybody. They just need to be aware if they choose to stand for these autonomy levels, it may happen that they will never be famous or will have success with the money values. So this is just what we need to say them. You can choose and decide, of course, but it's the position you want to make. So I think the word position is something really important, like to show the different positions that an author can have. It can differ person to person, but we should be able to open doors for everybody, and this make it complicated. How can I open the same door for those authors who want to travel and are social level enough to do it for themselves? And how can we open another door for those who do have this value, inspiration, and autonomy, which is, according to my point of view, totally legitimate? You do not have to fulfill all those perspectives or values. You can choose for yourself what suits you the most, but this make it complicated on the national and international level, how to make the door open for everybody.
Yeah, and I think one thing which is crucial, at least on our side at European level, is that people very often are not informed of the opportunities. So you're right. I think that it's the choice of the artist. but very often, and in the most cases, they don't know that there are opportunities. Funding opportunities or other opportunities. And networking awareness, it's something key, and joining the dots. And this is true for all the artists, for all the cultural professionals. This is something we can do at European level. And this is the only thing we can do, actually. But this is something crucial, and this is something important to work on.
Talking about position, Dennis was explaining the changes in storytelling and in literature, the interventions Corinne was mentioning, and also the importance of being aware of your position. Marlijn, looking at your position as a writer, you started out as someone with the desire to write, I think, but then you started to network. You're in a talent development program at Wintertuin. You're also leading workshops and joining networks as borderlines in the region where you live. How could you describe your position as a writer? What definition would you use?
It's a very difficult question, because I never think of myself in terms of position. I hope. But what I normally see is when someone wants to get something done in Limburg, for example, they come across me or my small organization in some way. So, and that's not because we're extremely famous or well known. We don't have that ambition. But it's because I value connecting people a lot. It brings me, it brings me a lot of joy. And that was also the problem. That's why I wrote to Wintertuin, for instance, because I was connecting so much people, I forgot to connect myself with the world. So I was always collaborating with others and connecting everybody. And I did not think about my own writing career. So there's also a danger in wanting to work in highly social constructions, and it's that you forget your own autonomy and your own free will of creating, and that's something that also exists. So it's a totally it's not the one or the other. It's a complete constant balancing of poles. So that's my experience-based evidence for that.
I totally understand. I have a question for you from the writing department where I work. We tend to say that collaboration, moderation, working together is an artistic competence. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, as long as it means that you guard your own autonomous position within the collaboration and talk with each other about that autonomous position and learn to respect each other's personal wishes and differences. Yeah. So working with others doesn't mean it's about the others. It also means it's still about yourself. So in that sense, if there's enough room for you as an individual, and for the others as individuals, you could create an environment of collaboration. That's how we do it with borderlines, for instance, because the cultural differences around the borders here inside Limburg with Belgium and Germany are small, but at the same time huge. Yeah. And we don't try to solve the differences. We just totally show them to each other and talk about them, and we don't try to solve anything. And that's the only way you can work together in an international platform. At least that's what I think.
Yeah. Dennis?
Just a question for Marlijn. Did you want to become an author, or did you want to write, if you get my question? As in, does your authorship have to be your full-time job? Because there's lots of examples from history from authors who were something during the day, as it were, and the daytime job was something else than the authorship. Can you can you sort of see a position for yourself in which your writing is part of everything you do? Or would you say, well, an author really needs the time and concentration, etc., to focus on the writing only?
Do you mean then is that the authorship, that the collaboration, etc., is part of the authorship? Is that the question?
No, I mean that your writing is not your sole it's not a profession, perhaps, not your sole job on which you depend for your entire income, but it's one of the roles you have, as it were. It's not your full-time job. Perhaps you have another job, and then you write as well.
So everything I do has to do with literature and literary projects, and I try to make room in my schedule for my own autonomous work, and then I lock myself in a room without a phone. I actually did a project last year on that, to make more personal space, and I literally made more personal space by shutting off Wi-Fi and throwing out the phone and taping off a working area on the floor. So I really have to say to myself, today is a writing day. You're not going to do any production or do anything else. But everything I do has to do with literature in some sense. So, and that's an advantage. It also feeds, the two worlds also feed each other in some sense. I don't have a completely different profession next to my writing, but my authorship is a part of a broader literary life, I would say.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
This is a very interesting topic. I think also when it comes to the creative writing programs that Martin talked about, is the development not of an authorship based on book production or text production, but an entire artistic practice, which consists of things like you do in Borderlines or other things that you do, and the writing as well. I think looking at the time, if you agree, this is also a great cliffhanger towards the next topic that we will discuss after the break, which also consists of two worlds, the writer and the social domain, and I and the others, as Marlijn mentioned. If there are no objections, I would suggest to have a 10-minute break. Yeah, Corinne?
Yes, I just want to make a comment regarding the presentation of, I don't remember a name, sorry, the presentation of the pilot. Yes, there is a mix between translators, writers, startup creators, etc. So I think it would be useful to be more precise, because I don't think that the needs for the translators, even literary translators, and the needs of the writers, and a fortiori the needs of the literary professionals are the same.
Yeah.
And if we want to have a good needs analysis, I think we have to make a distinction between the three professions, because I do think that there are three different professions.
I think this also could be a question to you, Martin de Purk, if you are there. To think about this, you also asked the question: do we need to counterbalance the groups that we research? This is, I think, an important question raised by Corinne on the distinction between these groups. If it's okay with you, I would like to ask Martin to get back on this after the break, and have a 10-minute break, and then go to the next topic. But first, go into this research question topic that Corinne put up. Visible now in the panel for all of us is Maarten de Purk, Professor Doctor at the University in Nijmegen. We all saw him in the video. Thank you for that, Maarten. And we ask you to join us to discuss the topic Corinne raised on the groups, the differences between translators, writers, literary professionals, and maybe even writers outside projects as Sela, as you mentioned in your video. So maybe you could answer Corinne's question on the importance of making this distinction.
Yeah, thank you. Do you receive me well? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Now, thank you all, first of all, for your reactions and also your enthusiasm. I was also really happy to hear that you were using all the different regimes in your reactions and in the discussion already. So we see that we gave some sort of vocabulary to you all. And I think that that's also good for us to see that there is some sort of need for words to talk about these these complex notions of why do you do the things you do and what do you do them for. Most writers also in creative writing programs are interested in creating, and I think that what we want to look at is how you can learn people also to reflect upon the sort of role you wish to play as a creator. And I do agree with the fact that these groups are very different. The reason why we have chosen translators and writers as our main focus is, of course, because they play a role in Sela, also the literary professionals. So you have these three groups there. And what we thought in the very beginning, but Eva already mentioned this after her pilot study, that she saw differences between the groups, but we're not really looking at the needs of these groups in the first instance, though I think that that's something we can deduce from the picture we arrive at after the research, but we are looking at their value orientations. And I think that looking at these values, that you might work from this model that's there, and that may apply to the three groups. But that if you want to make an analysis of the needs they have, then I think that will be really different, and that you will also need different policy instruments to respond to these needs. But in order to make the research feasible, which is also very important, I do think it is better to focus, for instance, on the writers, on the artists, on the creators, to focus on this group first, also because that is I think, but I don't think it is the group that is perhaps the most precarious one, because the translators groups is also a very precarious group. That's also something we learned from the interviews. So I think it's important to make a distinction. But my question to you would be, I already said, well, we work on value orientations. So we want to conduct interviews, to interview a lot of people. Maybe we still have to decide whether it would be the writers or translators or the professionals. But then there's this step of translating our results to something that is called policy, and that might be something of an analysis of needs, something you can use as a starting point to create instruments. And my question would then be, who would be doing this, and also what kind of dissemination of results do you need? Because we usually publish an article in an academic journal. I don't know if anybody outside academia reads this. So what would actually be a good way of disseminating the results that we are trying to obtain?
I think this is a question for Corinne and also for Michala. Yeah. So Corinne, could you go first, or?
Maybe I can go first.
Yeah, of course, Michala. Go ahead.
I think from my national perspective, if I have clear statements emerging from your paper, then we can talk with the Ministry of Culture. So the literary institutions like me, who are in all the European countries, do have links with the ministries who do say, how shall I use my budget? So it's up to me and up to the Ministry of Culture how the money are, where do they go? Which door do they open? So if we see that there are clear objectives, how can we help the emerging authors or the emerging translators? Then it's easily disseminated through the literary institutions like me.
And do you think CELA could play a role in this dissemination?
Well, it's a little bit tricky. With CELA, we have different target groups, like the partners. So some of them are festivals, some of them are creative writing schools. It's a little bit diverse group of people involved. We are all enthusiastic, which makes us a family a little bit. But I think it's good to go through the governmental bodies and institutions. So like literary funds, literary centers, and they do exist through all over. Of course, it would be great to have the support from Commission, but I think it's important to be also really active on this national levels.
So we need a policy advice, and we need another conversation after the research has been done.
Yeah. Well, we will continue these conversations, of course, every 4 or 5 months. I see a lot of people in the audiences that were also the last time there. So I think we are somehow building up this conversation, and this is also a part of the dissemination, of course.
Maybe just one more comment. Maybe it's good to have the outcomes from your study and to give it to the associations of authors. They also do play an important role. Maybe they do have different perspectives. They could add something at the local level. So this is a good channel to disseminate as well through the authors and translators associations at the national levels.
Yeah. Okay. Do anybody have anything to add on this, on the dissemination? Corinne, you're muted.
From our side, what would be useful and what we usually receive, it's a kind of recommendations. So whatever the format, but this is really useful for us, so that we can see what we could do according to you on the study.
Yeah. So send it to you as well. Okay.
Okay. Stay on board, Maarten, and everyone else. I would,
I would like also to thank Maarten, because his answer is very clear to my question. So I understand now that you are at different state, and of course for the values direction, of course, it's true for all the professions. So it's not an issue. Well,
and I think it would also, we have the experience within CELA that the position of the translator is indeed a very vulnerable position. So I think it's wise to involve them in this research, also from the side of the policy making in the future. We tend to forget them in many ways. So let's keep them on board, and also in this project and in this research, because they are vital to our ecosystem, I think, in many ways.
I have just one small comment. It was important for us and really hard to discover what does it mean emerging. And there was a huge discussion between the Czech authors and Czech translators. Am I emerging or am I not? So the lack of vocabulary and words and career path, it's really missing as well. So it would be interesting for me also to elaborate on this, on what is it emerging. Do I have 1 book or 2 books? Do I have 5 books but still feeling emerging? So this was really a struggling starting point from us to select the right participants for the CELA project, and I think all of the partners did the same. They had the same complications.
This is also, I think, a great topic on a conversation to look at this from this perspective. What is talent? What is talent development? What is emerging? What is post-emerging? Also a very interesting term. So yes, I think we need vocabulary, and Maarten is very, very right there. Also on policy making, but also within creative writing programs, within talent development, we need, and I think this value regime is very useful to actually think about the future of authorship and the present of authorship, in words that we cannot use now because we don't know them. So I think we're still in the cliffhanger, still on the stepping stone towards the next part of this afternoon, which is about writers in the social domain. And we could state, of course, that modern day authors, and we were discussing this before, operate increasingly more on project basis, in collaborations, more projects outside the context of the literary industry, book publishing, etc. So in the second part of today's conversations, we have the help of a research project by the Denktank of the Radboud University on the Schrijvers, which is a creative writing project by Wintertuin for people who are learning Dutch. And as we did in the beginning of this afternoon, this topic is also introduced by 3 short video messages in which we learn about the great social literary project, the Schrijvers, and also a video about this Radboud University think tank that focused on this project. Elke, if you're ready, we can start the videos, and I would suggest to do the 3 videos in a row and then discuss what we heard and maybe some questions that that come forward in these videos.
When Wintertuin asked us if we wanted to host a schrijfwerkplaats for newcomers, we immediately said yes. As a library, we find it very important that migrants and refugees are given the opportunity to learn Dutch and fully participate in society. That is why we also have a language cafe where they can practice speaking Dutch, but we also find creative writing that happens in the schrijfwerkplaats very important. Not only to learn the language, but also to use the artistic expressiveness of language, to be able to express feelings, experiences and thoughts, and to produce new writers. Because as a library, ultimately, you want a collection that reflects the diversity of society. Abu, one of the participants in the Schrijfwerkplaats in Roermond, said, "As a refugee, I feel like part of a family and I want to tell the story of that family." Dana and other participants said, "Participating in the Schrijfwerkplaats has given me self-esteem and inspiration." And Nasser from Syria said, "I've learned to express my feelings in Dutch." In the final editing, it was very nice to see how much the text of the participants can enrich our Dutch language. After removing some mistakes, you could see what beautiful new word combinations and sentence constructions had been created. The great thing is also that after the 10 lessons of the Schrijfwerkplaats, Wintertuin gives the participants a stage on paper and online, and offers them opportunities to continue their artistic development as writers. For us as a library, it was very nice to have the Schrijfwerkplaats in-house. Every Tuesday evening there was a bubble in which the participants worked together with the writing teachers and had lively conversations about the best way to say something in Dutch. The Schrijfwerkplaats is an opening to a new future, and we are happy to contribute to that.
Good afternoon, my name is Randa Awad. I am a writer, Palestinian Syrian writer. I came in 2017. I have 2 books, a bundle of short stories. I participated in Schrijvers, werken in Utrecht, Bibliotheek, with Nurcha, the organizer, and Yantel and Rosa. It was a great experience for me as they exposed us to another culture. We were like 8 persons and from different backgrounds. Each one has different looks and scope of imagination about how to write literature. And we come out with a bundle of a different form of literature in a book, poetry and short stories and a text. And also it was so important because I know Netherlands poet Nisreen Mubaraki. She is a translator also. She talked about her experience in translation and the difficulty to translate from one language to another. Also, it makes me so happy at the end, like to participate in front of a public and to read a text from the book, people like it and find it also interesting event. I would like always to have or to participate in such experience because it make our scope of imagination is larger and it give us a new idea and a new experience. It was very important to mix people from different backgrounds with Netherlander people and to share ideas because literature is something universal. You can't like limit it for one culture, for one country, and that's what Schrijver werken did. So I appreciate them and thanks for everyone who participated, who organized, and who made it in this event. Thanks.
Welcome to Radboud University, everybody. We're here with two members of the think tank Literature in Society, Society in Literature, who will represent the 9 people who are actually part of that group that worked together with Wintertuin, I think from February till July 2021. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Willeke and this is Yuri.
Hi, I'm Yuri. I did American Studies.
I did English Language and Culture.
And we both chose to do the minor Literature in Society, Society in Literature.
Great. And as part of that minor, you also participated in the think tank, for which you were given an assignment. We call this the client. This was Noortje Kessels from Wintertuin. She gave you the assignment. Can you tell us a bit what the think tank was all about as part of the minor? What kind of course was it?
Well, within the minor, we were able to choose between 2 think tanks, and we both chose for this one together with 7 other people. And the assignment was mostly focused on voices that weren't heard very often in society, and this then mostly related to literature.
And I know because there were two think tanks within the bigger group of the minor, and you chose to do specifically this one. Were there any reasons for choosing this think tank to work with Wintertuin instead of the other?
I think I mostly chose this one because I like to see, to get to know more about those people we don't hear often about. We mostly hear about, for example, the people we interviewed for this minor. People with a migration background, and it was interesting to hear their stories and their experience in a whole new country instead of the experience we mostly hear about in the news, which is mostly negative.
Yeah, and I think it's also a very important topic to think about, to make sure that all those voices are heard more often. So that's why we picked it.
Okay, and of course, as students of literature, you brought certain expertise to the think tank. Could you say a few things about that? So the things you had to offer to Noortje and Wintertuin?
I think we both had a lot of courses that involved literature. We both had kind of the English track, so we both had British literature, American literature.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, and I think in a lot of courses we also already talked about representation and marginalized voices, and of course we had experience in research and debate and that sort of thing.
Okay, good. And you said you worked together with 7 other people, so the group was 9 in total. When you were given the assignment by Noortje, what did you do? How did you divide the tasks?
Yeah, we kind of split up into 3 groups. One group were going to research on the basis of authorship. The other group was going to be interviewing the participants of the Wintertuin Schrijverswerkplaats. And yeah, there was kind of a small third group which involved me. We were going to translate one piece from English to Dutch because the one group was entirely filled with international students, and the end, final product has to be in Dutch, of course, for the winter time. So we also had a translation group.
Oh, that's good to know as well. So that your group was also composed of Dutch students, even though you worked in English all the time, and international students. And of course, this particular think tank was very much about authorship and questions of the future of authorship, etc. What did you learn specifically from the think tank about authorship?
Yeah, I think we really learned the importance of giving people that are unheard in society, to give them a voice. And in this particular think tank, it was very useful that there were Dutch authors helping the other people with their language and spelling and everything, while the people with a migration background really were able to tell their own story.
Okay, and if there's one memory you have of the think tank period earlier this year, what would it be? What's the thing you remember best?
I think the interviews for me, because there was one person who we all asked them what their favorite book was, which they read, and there was one person who mentioned a little book of love songs that he really liked in Dutch. That I think that was really memorable.
Oh, right. And you?
I think for me as well, the interviews, I also participated in that part of the research, and there was also this person who really liked Russian literature, and because his father told him all about it was very interesting to get to know that, because how often do you hear those kind of stories from people with migration background?
Yes.
Yeah. And there was one person who actually said that everybody has a writer inside of them, and that you just need to, it's just a skill that you need to learn, and once you learn it and train it, then you can always become an author and you can always write whatever you want. And that was pretty amazing to hear from her.
Yeah, I think it's also very, very well done by the Wintertuin, by kind of solving that gatekeepers problem, that now those people who often are not getting heard, whose voices are often not getting heard, are now finally heard by this project. So I think that's also very well done.
Great. Yes. Thank you very much. I think you've given a great insight into what a think tank does, because for the university that was also a new concept, and what your specific think tank entailed. So thank you very much, and we may see you in the future at Wintertuin or wherever.
Great. Thank you, Dennis, for the interview. I guess that was you. You initiated this think tank. This is a very interesting topic, I think. We are talking about writing in the social domain, and we have here a number of people involved. Dennis with the think tank looking at this project, of course. Marlijn as a writer, as one of the students said, helping others, so a helping writer, which is an interesting word. I would first like to go to you, Lily. You are endorsing a project like these from your organization. What is the importance of these kind of projects that are not, in the first place, artistic? They are not only amateur art. It's the question, I think, today. What is this? But what is the importance for you and your organization to endorse these projects?
Well, let me first say that I got very enthusiastic from the think tank and the students telling about thinking about what writing and literature can mean for several people. And the problem is that we make a distinction between professionals and amateurs. And that I don't agree, because everyone on her or his own level can make some progress. And we call that talent development on every level that you can have, because there are a lot of people who don't have entrance on arts education, but they have the ability to express themselves, and with a few tools they can make beautiful things. And that's what we do with our organization, looking for the tools and looking for the networking with each other. And Scylla has a beautiful tool in creating a network for writers, but I think we all have a tool in making a network with arts and society. And that's what we are doing, giving writers the opportunity to get out of their bubble and make a step into society and get their inspiration there to make great novels. And giving people who are not heard a voice, they can't express themselves. And the students told us about this, people who come from another culture, or people who don't speak, how do we call it, people who are not trained in language, who have a low literacy, laaggeletterdheid noemen we dat. And there is so much more where writers can get their inspiration from elderly people. So I think it works as a cross. Writers can also get inspiration, but they can help people move forward. But is that not professional? When someone with a poor language background can tell a story in their own words, I think they've made a huge step. Maybe it's not professional in the way of the literature industry, but sometimes it's I get very enthusiastic from hearing from such people.
Yeah. So maybe that's a question to you, Marlijn. As Liddy said, it's helping, it's guiding maybe, and editing, all competences outside the direct artistic competence of writing, but it's also maybe inspiration. Could you elaborate a little on how it is to work as a writer in these workshops?
Well, to elaborate on what Lily said, you have to get rid of the sense that there is a huge cultural difference between everyone. I mean, it's there, but you have to get rid of that sense. And you have to get rid of the difference between amateurs and professionals. And when you do that, you have to listen a lot and ask what everybody wants to do in the schrijfwerkplaats. And then you have the opportunity to connect on a, I would say, deeper level than the level of talking about cultural differences, or talking about linguistic differences, or talking about amateur professional. And then you can connect on a more emotional, social level. And from that point on, you understand each other. So there's no real barrier there. Of course, you notice the language barrier while you're working, but because in the schrijfwerkplaats we all speak Dutch, the participants also want to speak Dutch, so they give the most effort to big effort to speak Dutch with us. And if you're talking with each other on a level of, for let's say, metaphors, you really have to elaborate and maximize the language and make a huge room, as it were, with words, and pick the right words to discover exactly what someone wants to say. And that's an artistic process that has nothing to do, in my sense, that has nothing to do with helping in the psychological sense. That's an artistic, you're really making with one of the participants in your mind space a room of words, and you pick the right words in that room to write and understand each other. And that's, for my, I would say that's artistic. And that's got little to do with a psychological way of helping. That doesn't mean that the effects cannot be psychological. The effects after the process always can be what I mostly feel is that, of course, the participants are always grateful and we're always helpful. So that creates a difference in, I would not say hierarchy, but in the way we interact psychologically with each other. And that's something to know. At least that's what I think. That's also addicting. It's addicting to help someone who wants to have help, and that's also sometimes that's a problem, because you have to be careful in doing too much. You really have to listen what someone's asking you, or else you get my how do you say, vocal, my social trap would be I get involved too much. So also distance can be helpful. So and all these things occur working in the schrijfwerkplaats.
So this really developed your position as a writer, or your skills as a writer. If you look at the values, that will be the project city regime and the inspiration regime. I think combination of the two. Dennis, you researched and talked about this for a couple of months with your students in the think tank. Did you learn something from this project, and did it change your view on authorship, or could you comment on what the students said? I think I saw somewhere in the background the notion of Marjorie Perloff, the unoriginal genius, things that you talked about when it comes to authorship.
You mean, did I learn something?
Yeah, did you learn something? Yeah.
First of all, I didn't initiate the think tank, as you said earlier. The think tank is an obligatory part of the minor program they're doing. And it's basically a kind of internship in the shape, with a group. So instead of an individual one, as a group, they execute an assignment from, indeed, the client. It's a very unfriendly word. But that's a partner in society, I always say, in the real world, so outside of the university. And in this case, this was Noortje Kessels from Wintertuin, who I see is also in the audience. And we were given a kind of brief of the assignment at the start. And then we, with our group, we read scholarly texts about authorship, and also about authorship in the service of society, etc. So changing ideas about authors. And then Noortje visited us, gave the actual assignment. So on the basis of the academic expertise of the students, they were able to help her with the execution of the actual assignment when they visited the writer's workshop, etc. I think for me, I learned especially a lot about supervising a thing like this, but I guess also about authorship. So the thing you saw in the background of the video with the students, that was actually one of Noortje's slides. I thought that would be funny to have in the back of the video. So I learned from that too, or at least it also made me more aware of also the kind of topics we're discussing today. So to me, for a long time, the author was still very much this kind of individual soul figure, working in the ivory tower, expressing his or her very individual, unique emotions, etc. Sort of cliche of the romantic author. And of course, I'm also aware of how authorship has changed, or how authors have been encouraged to also redefine their task, etc. But certainly by supervising this particular think tank, it sort of hammered home to me how important it is also to study authorship at university, perhaps from different angles. So in fact, this think tank was a perfect example of something I referred to before the break, the collaboration between university and partners outside of the academy, which also is great for us as teachers, because we also learn from that collaboration.
Somewhere in the video, the students were mentioning the word gatekeeping. I think all of us sitting here, in a sense, are gatekeepers in the literary culture. And does a project like this, and for me personally, I must say it does. Also, the question who owns the story, who is the writer, etc., are discussions that we are having now that we did not have 5 or 10 years ago. Do you recognize, maybe for you, Michala, also this change in the position that we have as gatekeepers when it comes to what Lily mentioned, the distinction between amateur and professional, between autonomy and the word helping again, but maybe being active in the social domain?
I think the borders between the definitions, they like merge together, so it's not clear who is an author. Everybody who writes a blog is an author. There is always this discussion, we do celebrate blog of the year, but is it still literature? Who are the authors? It's a new publishing ways. You could publish your own book when you make a crowdfunding, so it makes it all really. In previous times and years, it was more strict. Who is an author? What is a publishing house? Who does what? Who is a literary professional? Who is a lecturer in a publishing house? Now the roles somehow for me become more unclear, and they are more like overlapping, which makes it even important for the emerging or writers, or for all the people who want to be involved in this career and in this landscape. They need to know all these overlapping roles they need to play. So for me, it's quite complicated as a state institution to be so flexible, because we are not flexible. This makes it for us really complicated. Do we want to still encourage blog writers? Is it still an author? Is it a good literature? So there are so many questions when all the roles are not so clear, that we just need to aware of these changes, and we are trying to map them at least. But it takes time when the system is able to react on all those changing. And if the boundaries are not so clear, it's really complicated to target the instruments and target the measures and target the policy. But we are trying to observe it at least and find words for it.
Yeah. Well, this issue is, of course, potentially a big problem if we are gatekeeping an area that we have lost the exact control over. What is the answer to this question? This is a difficulty, I think, for state institutions, but also for talent development programs as we organize. I think for policymakers at the EU, this is a problem, and also at the university, and for you at Cultuur Oost, we are all confronted with a change, which we can maybe identify through these value systems. What do we need to stay in touch? What do we need to be able to give words to these changes and to fulfill our role as gatekeepers, policymakers, talent developers in an actual and urgent way, and not walking behind the music? Does anyone have a beginning of an answer to this big question?
Well, I think first of all, it's very interesting that we're talking about finding the words for things, because developing a vocabulary, I think Maarten de Purik also referred to this, how important that is. And before the break, we talked about this. So if you collaborate, you need a kind of shared language, and you find that by collaborating, I suppose. But I hope that my students in the think tank saw that, especially at university, we're very good at conceptualizing things and thinking about terms and concepts and words, etc. And sometimes the students are very insecure about what they have to offer to society. And you saw in the video, they went all shy when I asked that question. What kind of expertise did you bring to the think tank? I think it's especially that. It's very important that they play that role also in the developing of the language we may use to collaborate across the boundaries that perhaps in the past you still had.
Yeah. So collaboration also between the institutions as we are here represented, Marlijn?
Not only making new words, but taking existing structures under the loop again, I would say, because with the Schrijfwerkplaats, we also make a book, but it's a very traditional way of publishing the texts. So you would say, in a traditional sense, you have multiple authors, the participants, and they make a book together, and then we present the text. But of course, that's not the point of the project. So if you zoom in on the project level, the book is also just a tool, a part of a bigger thing. And to make that, wisseling, ik wil iets zeggen in de trant van omkering.
Reversing.
Yeah, so reversing those two things, we don't have the schrijfwerkplaats just to make a book with the participants. So also inventing a new language, but also taking things we take for granted under the loop again, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So this is a new way of looking at our what existing, we used to call the literary industry or the book industry.
Yeah.
From what you as a writer think is important. The values are there again, of course. Lily, you just mentioned this distinction between amateur and professional, and the inspiration given by work not artistically in the first place. Do you think that we can make a difference by collaborating and really step forward into a new way of thinking about what is authorship and how can we endorse these kind of projects without being only active in the social domain, but also artistically active?
Well, that's a very big question for me because I'm not an author. I'm an artist, but not an author. I'm from the music department, let me say. But one thing I want to put very clear is that I'm a gatekeeper for art. So I think art has a standard, and we have to keep that standard. But the society these days asks from us as artists to share what we believe, share what we have, share in what we have had in our education. And that's what I mean by writing or arts in the social domain. We don't, I don't want it that what we believe in and what we experience in arts, that stay in our own bubble, but that we make other people part of it. So the professional standard of arts, that's very important to keep it and not to generalize it and make it fluid, like Mikala said, but that more people enjoy the way of making arts, to give the opportunity to experience what it is to be a maker. That is maybe what I mean by professional and amateur. And what we have learned in our studies is of very high standards, but we have to find a language or a method so that we can make more people part of it. That is what I mean. And not to make art less valuable, but more that more people can take part of it and being
more accessible. Yeah. Michaela, if you want to react on this.
Yes, a different perspective. I do agree that we need more people to have this experience with creation on every level, from the schools and from the libraries. Maybe there will be one person in 1,000 who will be professional then and who will develop his professional journey. So I was referring to the professional landscape that is working already with some talents that they have already shown themselves. But I fully do support this project, which was great, that we should bring culture, and this autonomy and this inspirational thing about culture, that everybody should try to create at least something, regardless if it's literature or painting or anything. And all the involvement of all the schools and libraries, it's really crucial, because without those projects, we will never get any authors. It's something you have as an experience as you were a kid, and you won't maybe develop it further within your professional life then. So it's important to fire those small fires within youth and young people.
So,
and
Lily, yeah.
I think we have the society asks from us a broader perspective. I think as writer or as artist, we can give them a voice, and that is what we have to do too. So to include more people in society, to include more culture in our books, and not only from a wide perspective, but or from an able perspective. But we don't have any head persons in books that are disabled or are from China or that, and that's why I think that also artists have to be connected with society as a whole and not in their own small part where they are living.
So this is an assignment to the writer to be connected, to share, to make accessible art, to be more inclusive. These are a lot of tasks for a writer. If we are talking about studying literature, Dennis, what are we studying then?
Well, that depends. So as I said before, perhaps in the past we focused especially on text analysis, but these days we also study the literary infrastructure, the book industry, etc. So these kind of questions are also important for us to study. At university. I think especially in master programs, but well, the think tank was part of a bachelor program, so that also becomes part of the bachelor studies.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's moved beyond the focus on a narrative analysis, but also includes the study of the infrastructure, the role of the author, the role of literature in society, the way society returns in the literature, etc. Exactly these kind of questions.
Corinne, you raised your hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to make a few comments about what has been said about a definition, terminology, professionals and amateurs, and I have a question to Lily also. From our point of view, professionals and amateurs are distinct, and the distinction is very clear and precise. Because Creative Europe program does not support amateurs, but professionals. And what we understand by professionals is the artists that make a living from their art or want to make a living. That's difficult, but this is their objective. The amateurs do not want necessarily to make a living from their art. And this is nothing to do with the quality of the works and nothing to do with the talent, of course. So it's just a difference of make a living or not from an art. And I fully agree with you that we need to have a clear definition and a clear terminology to express what we want to do, what we want to support. And as Marlene said, we need to listen to the others in order to provide the right support. So this is really important. And if we don't have a clear definition on what we want to do and what we want to do in order to provide the artists or the cultural professionals the right support, it's difficult.
So a clear definition on what we are. Could those value regimes, as we talked about in the first part, could they be helpful in creating or coming to this clear definition that we need for gatekeeping and also maybe for the artist practice itself?
Yeah, a clear definition of the objectives, the results we want to meet, and it's crucial.
Mm-hmm. And could impact So the impact a writer makes
because
could be
if
part
not,
of this.
we don't have the right impact or
Yeah.
the expected impact, of course.
Yeah. This is, Michaela, completely different from the way that we worked 15 years ago, right? Yeah.
I haven't been in this industry before 15 years, so I entered it 5 years ago or 4, and it has
still
already started the changes. So I'm used to it, that it's all really changing fast, even in this industry. But I think the Czech publishers, the traditional ones, they have struggles to adjust to those changes, and I see that they need more explanation also about the changes in the literary market themselves, even if they are the main players. So it's quite funny for me that the publishing houses sometimes do not want to be flexible and change a little bit their perspectives. So, but I do understand it. If you work for 20 years in a given set and you are used to it, it's quite challenging to change it and adjust it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Dennis.
It's time, yeah.
I was about to say that's why the writers' workshop is a great idea, because they sort of give access to the, let's say, to platforms for people to write and publish their stuff before the industry catches up on a new situation. So that's why it's important to have these initiatives, I'd say.
But again, it's important to link the both initiatives and the authors and the publishing houses. Sometimes it makes it really complicated to link now total different approaches from the authors and from the publishing houses. They still have this traditional approach to it. So, yeah.
This is a sometimes a funny question that I ask my students at the creative writing at the University of the Arts. Who of you want to publish? 10 years ago, I think in a group of 20 raised their hands. Now sometimes it's only 2 or 3. They want to do other things, like these kind of projects, and still they are being perceived in our courses as authors. Only the authorship changed completely. And I think we are not yet there that we can have a clear definition, but I think conversations like these contribute at least to developing a vocabulary on this, and also the work of the think tank, and especially also the research that Martin announced and Helke explained and Eva did. I hope it will be helpful to in next conversations reach a little bit closer towards definitions. I see a raised hand, Lily.
I want to bring something more in it, and we haven't talked about that, but Scylla is maybe working on that. Against all those traditional aspects, we haven't spoken about urban arts, spoken word artists, rap music. That is, according to me, a new style of literature. I don't know, but it is upcoming, and I'm very curious what you think about this. And well, maybe it's not for this time to discuss about it, but I think it's an upcoming sector. Yeah.
It is, or you could say, a reviving sector. I think the ancient Greek, they really looked down upon the written word. You had to perform it. So I think we're back somewhere. I do agree. This is a very interesting topic to discuss, and I would really love to do this in the next conversation, and also invite there the Dutch Literary Fund, for instance, that they are struggling with this when it comes to the grants, for instance, and also the publishing houses are struggling. You want to scout talent, you want to give talent a platform, but what if you cannot earn money by selling rights? This is a very interesting topic. Thank you for raising this. I would suggest that, coming to a conclusion, we could conclude that we have a lot of topics to discuss next time. And I really like the notion that we need a vocabulary, and the only way to reach the vocabulary is to collaborate and to talk to each other, of course, and to find ways to define authorship, gatekeeping, artistic relevance, the distinction between amateur and professional, etc. And looking at the time and the promise of a beer at the bar, which was maybe a little metaphoric, but I would suggest you do this. I would like to ask you, do you have any last comments to conclude this afternoon? I will make a short round. Michala?
I just want to thank you for the invitation. It was really interesting to hear all the ideas and to meet you all. It would be better to meet you in person and have a real drink at the bar. And hopefully there will be this time coming soon. So just thank you.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much, Michala. Dennis, do you have any last comments?
No, thank you very much for this great conversation indeed. I just wondered, but perhaps there's no time, if people in the audience would like to ask any questions or respond to things.
They are very quiet now. Some nootje, a little side note, she says, I believe everyone has a voice already, but not everybody has a stage yet. That's a very good comment, I think. We are talking about people having no voice. Thank you, Nootje, for this. You had a stage and a written voice on this one. That's a very, very important distinction, I think. That's also about gatekeeping, and the importance of our role and position in the field is not to give people a voice, but to listen, maybe, and to give a platform. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the insights on the think tank, which is, I think, very interesting to work together with the university from our projects and to have students and researchers actually looking at what we are doing from a completely different perspective. This is very helpful and very, very interesting. Lily, do you have any last comments on what we spoke about?
Well, thank you for the invitation for this conversation. I was very attracted by it because we work naturally in at making a practice from the talent development and makers. How do they work in practice? So I was very. It was very interesting for me to hear from all those things developed by the university and by Wintertuin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily. Corinne, do you have anything to add?
Thank you indeed for the invitation, and it was really nice meeting you. I still have my question to Lily, but I am afraid if I ask you my question, I will open a new debate. So, but I will ask my question, but we won't have time to answer this question. My question was to Lily, why do you say that the society asks the artists, the writers, to be more involved? So is it the society asking this, or this is something else? So I think that this is
okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's
about it.
Yeah, in another conversation. I hope we will have other conversations later on. So thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Corinne. A very, very interesting and also very interesting topic, I think, for a next conversation. This and the question on the definition. So thank you very much. And last but not least, of course, Marlijn, do you have anything to add?
Well, thanks, Elke and Frank, for organizing and for having me. It's real nice to meet you all. And it was a real big relief that we all shared the same questions and problems. I really experienced it as, with all the value structures, it really felt like being understood on some level. So it's all very new to me, but it was a real relief to see the presentation in forehand and talking about it right now. So thanks for that opportunity.
Thanks a lot for your contribution. You gave a lot of insight of the the work as an artist on these projects, which is very interesting, I think, for all of us. I would like to thank, as you mentioned, Marlijn, Elke. She is not visible, but she was the one behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Elke. And you did a great job there. And thank you in the audience. Thank you, of course, Helleke and Maarten and Eva for producing the videos. And I would love to announce the date of the next conversation, but we haven't said it yet. But you're all on our email list, so you will hear probably in 3-4 months, we will have the next conversations, and you're all invited. And I think from the topic point of view, we have a lot of input on definition, vocabulary, and on, is it the society asking the artist? I think this is a very interesting question. So we will move forward on this and invite you all for the next conversations. And for now, have a great weekend. For the Dutch, a lot of fun at the press conference tonight, where the new lockdown will be announced. I'm not sure how the situation is in Brussels and Prague, but we're hanging in there. And hopefully, one day we will have a live conversation somewhere together with an actual beer at the end. Now we have to do it all by ourselves. But thank you for joining us. Enjoy the weekend, and hope to see you at the next conversation.
You too, Francis.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.